Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is video 8 of our Essentials of Negotiation series. This particular video focuses on finding and using negotiation power. You may have heard some of this information in some of my previous leadership videos, or if you've taken classes on leadership, because power is one of those interesting things that we've been studying for a long time. As a matter of fact, we're going to be using some theory from the 1950s to understand how to gain power and utilize power in the negotiation process. So let's start out by considering why power is important in negotiation. Seeking power in negotiation arises from one of two perceptions. The negotiator believes they have less power than the other party, or the negotiator believes that they have more power than the other party. Makes sense, right? There are questions of tactics and motives. Tactics may enhance a negotiator's own power or diminish the other's power, and motives are why the negotiator uses the tactics. So commonly, negotiators create power differences to gain advantage or to block the other party's power moves. Negotiators may employ tactics to create power equalization as a way to level out the playing field. In general, those less concerned with power or those with matching power have easier deliberations and reach acceptable outcomes. All right, so let's get down to interests, rights, power, and negotiation. Negotiators focus on interests when they strive to learn about each other, what their interests are, and their priorities as a way to get agreements that create value. Negotiators focus on rights when they seek to resolve disputes by drawing on rules or standards or grounded in law or existing contracts. Negotiators focus on power when they use threats or other means to coerce the other party into making concessions. Negotiators cycle through all three strategies during the same encounter and tend to reciprocate these strategies. Starting a negotiation by conveying power can bring quick settlements if your threat is credible. Power and rights tactic may be really useful when the other party refuses to negotiate or when negotiations need to be restarted. The success of power and rights tactics depends on how they are implemented. Which brings us to the question, what is power? So power is used to dominate and control the other. That's distributed marketing. From the power holder's perspective, it's power over. The receiver feels powerless and dependent. Power used to work together is an integrative negotiation. The power holder has the power with the other, and the receiver feels empowered and independent. Environmental power, or A is more able to influence his environment than B is. Or relationship power, or A is able to influence B more than B is able to do with A. And then there's personal power, which is A is usually more able to satisfy his desires than B. Effective use of power requires sensitive and deft touch. Not only do targets change by situation, but the context changes as well. So let's get down to the theory I told you about from 1950s. Raven and French, if you know your theory, talked about expert power, reward power, coercive power, legitimate power, and referent power. Expert power is derived from having unique information about a subject. Reward power is derived from being able to reward others. Coercive power is derived from being able to punish others. Legitimate power is derived from the organization or formal title. And then referent power is derived from respect. And that's the kind of power your parents have or your preacher has or people who mentor you in some situations. So teachers, for instance, generally have a referent power too. So this discussion really is about the broader perspective on power. Informational power sources, power based on personality and individual differences, power based on position in an organization, relationship based sources of power, and context sources of power. So let's talk about information sources of power. Information power comes from a negotiator's ability to assemble and organize data to support their position, arguments, or desired outcomes. In negotiation, it is the most important source of power. The exchange of information is also at the heart of the concession making process. A common definition of the situation emerges and serves as a rationale for both sides to modify their positions and eventually arrive at a mutually acceptable agreement. Power derived from expertise is a special form of information power. Power based on personality and individual differences, cognitive orientation, the unity frame believes society is an integrated whole. Radical frame believes society is a continual clash of interests. And pluralist frame believes that power is equally distributed, motivation, orientation. Focus on energizing elements of the personality rather than ideology, dispositions, and related skills grounded in dispositions to be cooperative or competitive, moral orientation toward power. Individuals differ in their moral views about power and its use, moods, and moods can create, and power enhances the impact of emotional expression. Power based on position in an organization, or what we call structural power, really has two different approaches to structure that can be influence power. The first way is consistent with more traditional approaches to the organizational culture. That's the hierarchy of jobs forming a traditional organizational chart. My boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss. The second way is consistent with a newer approach to organizational structure that considers networks. It shows how negotiators' location in a network can contribute to bargaining power. We get power derived from traditional organizational hierarchy, which is the legitimate power that we talked about. The foundation of our social structure acquired by birth, election, appointment, a legitimate authority. It really can't function without consent of those who are being governed, right? There is also a legitimate power of reciprocity and equity and responsibility and dependence. Resource power is derived from the capacity to give or withhold resources such as money, supplies, human capital, time, equipment, critical services, or support. Controlling resources is a majority power source in organization. Rewards and punishments, they can be tangible or intangible. You must deal with the power holder, and the power holder must be willing to allocate resources depending on compliance and cooperation. So let's get down to power based on location and network. In a network, the lines ties represent flows and connects individuals or groups, which we call nodes, who actually interact with each other. Tie strength is the strength of relationships with others. Stronger ties indicate greater power to influence the other. Tie content is the resource that passes along the tie with another person. It builds the relationship, and then ties create trust, and then they gain strength. With network structure, it's the overall set of relationships within the social system. Centrality holds power, and the nodes occupant. Critically, the relevance is the information that is really essential. Flexibility is the individual. It has discretion to who gains access. Visibility is the task that's visible to others. And then a node can be a member of a coalition or a subgroup. Power based on relationships is important to understand. Goal and interdependence has a strong impact on how likely parties will be to constructively use the power. Cooperative goals shape the power with the organization. It induces expectations of assistance, gives greater support, helps with persuasion over coercion, and trusting attitudes. Competitive goals shape a power over orientation, and it enhances power differences and the use of power to achieve personal goals. Reference power is based on an appeal to common experiences, a common past or fate, or membership in the same group. More salient when one party uses commonality to increase their power. Referent power can be negative when it's used to seek to create distance between themselves and others or to label other people. So bottom line is you have to keep things in context. As we talked about in other videos, a strong BATNA is a source of power. Look it up in my other videos. It increases the likelihood of making the first offer. It increases your outcomes when compared to not having a BATNA. And it provides leverage and confidence, and they don't have to agree in order to have an offer, and then leads to a sense of entitlement and higher aspirations. Culture shapes what kinds of power are seen as legitimate and how people act to influence. It may contain rules about the use of power, differ in the degree of the power orientation, have power distance, which differs in different cultures, and then culture translates into embedded structural inequalities in a society. Agents, constituents, and external audiences can significantly change the power dynamics. So, a lot to consider when we talk about the use of power, which is really a critical negotiation sub-process. And so, consider these things as you seek to find and use your negotiation skills. It really comes down to power. Thanks so much for watching this 12-minute video. I hope that you've taken something useful away from it. More than anything else, I hope that you have a great day because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.